It is arguably the most ambitious and iconic concept album ever created, written by a band that was coming apart at the seams. Born out of the mind of one of the rock era's most provocative and insightful lyricists, its genesis began when a stadium-sized concert went sideways. Feeling disconnected from his audience, this musician lost it when one fan tried to incite a riot. He did something reprehensible, this frontman, but it did lead to the creation of this blockbuster record. Today, we're not only giving you the story behind this landmark album, but we're also delving deep into one of his greatest tracks, a powerful and dangerous warning against cutting ourselves off from reality. You're not going to want to miss this breakdown. It's coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you've ever thought that Velcro sneakers were the wave of the future when you were a kid, you're going to dig this channel of pure musical nostalgia. Make sure that you subscribe below right now. Click the bell so you always get our latest interviews and videos. I know you dig this channel. We also have a Patreon, putting full interviews up there. You can check out the content there. You can also become an honorary producer to help us curate this music history, and we have our merch below. They are truly rock and roll's most sophisticated philosophers, at least in my opinion, taking us into a mystical world of sound and vision. It's time for another chapter, one of our many videos on Pink Floyd. Today we're doing a deep dive into the band's monster masterpiece double concept album, The Wall. We're going to zero in on the third cut on side 4, Run Like Hell. You know, since The Wall's release on November 30th of 1979, and since its 1980 to 1981 tour and the 1982 movie, The Wall has all but become the definition of the term concept album. Truly a perfect album. It's also become a commercial blockbuster, certifying platinum 23 times over in America, according to the RIAA, and exceeding 33 million copies sold around the world. However, those astronomical numbers are only enough to make it the second best-selling Pink Floyd album of all time. Of course, Dark Side of the Moon eclipses that mark, having sold in excess of 50 million copies. But that's Pink Floyd for you. This band has shaped the rock era in ways that few others have. Back at the turn of the 80s, The Wall went to #1 in the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Italy, Sweden, Spain, Norway, Austria, and the Netherlands. It also reached #3 in the UK, surprisingly, should have been #1. Since then, it has continued to reemerge on the charts around the world. According to Billboard, The Wall has spent a total of 160 weeks on its album chart. In past Pink Floyd episodes, we've taken an in-depth look at a few other songs from this landmark album. For example, we've gone into the stories behind Hey You.
Hey You, don't help them to bury the lie.
Also Comfortably Numb. So despite the overwhelming success of Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here, Pink Floyd's 1977 tour In the Flesh was actually the first time they played an all-out stadium tour. Surprising there. The circuit had them performing at the largest venues in the world, often with over 100,000 fans in attendance. However, more isn't always better. In fact, this supersized road trip would wreak havoc on Roger Waters' psyche. Incredibly, while standing on stage in front of a sea of fans, the Floyd bassist had never felt more isolated or more alone. And in his fractured mental state, feelings of hatred for his audience welled up inside of him. As Waters looked out in the crowds, he saw nothing but sheep, dumb and ripe for exploitation. All of this came to a head one night in Montreal in front of 90,000 fans when Roger Waters lashed out at an audience member he felt was trying to provoke the band. Apparently, Waters beckoned him to the front of the stage and he spit in his face. Said Roger about it, what he wanted was a good riot, and what I wanted was to do a good rock and roll show. I got so upset in the end that I spat at him, which is a very nasty thing to do to anybody. End of quote. Very much so. Appalled by his actions, though, Waters spent a lot of time thinking about the downside of fame. He started to imagine a physical wall between himself and the audience. Waters then refined his metaphor into a narrative and enlarged its scope to encompass personal barriers and the walls that society builds. As Waters worked on his concept, it took an autobiographical turn, absorbing his own experiences and key events from the life of former frontman Syd Barrett. After 6 months of intensive effort, Roger Waters had laid the groundwork for Pink Floyd's famed rock opera. Work started. It began on editing the lyrics and the music. It happened in October of '78. Recording would start that April. Straight away, David Gilmour saw a need for the album to be fleshed out, to add a greater degree of musicality to it. However, Waters, he was stubborn, and he wanted to protect his lyrics from getting swallowed up in the music. As you can imagine, conflicts arose. Gilmour was adamant that this album was as much his as it was Waters'. This was going on here. So producer Bob Ezrin, he stepped in to mediate, and his presence proved vital in maintaining creative balance for the whole project. Ezrin was strong-willed, and he stood up to Waters. He demanded lyrical changes, when necessary. As Ezrin and Gilmour listened to the demo tape, they sorted the strong material from the weak, and David Gilmour set to work on the music. Ezrin, for his part, sharpened the storyline. In one all-night session, he rewrote the whole record, rearranging Waters' songs into a 40-page book that represented the entire album. The Wall, of course, chronicles the trials and travails of the semi-fictional Pink, from his childhood in post-war England to his later self-imposed exile as an adult. Right from the start, Pink's existence is cloaked in loss and seclusion. Entering the world, he is immediately robbed of his father, who of course dies in combat. This leaves him to grow up alone in the care of a suffocating single mother.
Mother, do you think they'll try to break?
As a youth, he becomes a cog in an educational system bent on creating compliant students. There, he's also shamed by his teacher. As a result of life's unrelenting disappointments and hardships, Pink sets to work constructing a psychological wall to separate himself from the world. There, safely cut off from human interaction, he can be shielded from life's emotional onslaught. Every incident that causes Pink pain is, all in all, of course, just another brick in the wall. Time passes, though, and Pink graduates from his oppressed childhood to the life of a disillusioned rock star. It's a fitting trope, actually, inspired by both Waters and Barrett. Now, early on, both musicians were drawn to the idea of being idolized from afar, and they often discussed the nature of fame. According to former Floyd manager Peter Jenner, the two wanted cars and girls and everything else. They certainly weren't averse to the trappings of fame, at least not at that point. But then none of them had really experienced what it was really like. When it did hit, and it hit hard, Syd could not cope. Not surprisingly, the fictional Pink doesn't fare any better. We find out that although Pink is married, he's neglectful and unfaithful to his wife. While he's on tour in an unnamed city, he looks forward to having a good time after the show and picks up a groupie to take back to his hotel room. She does a lot. This is captured in the track Young Lust. That's a song that Waters said was a pastiche of any young rock and roll band out on the road. In the ending of the song, Pink attempts to call his wife at home in England, and instead a man answers when the operator tries to connect him. So his wife has gotten her revenge, taking a lover of her own. Pink, of course, is humiliated and angry. Of course, he's staring his own hypocrisy in the face, and he puts the final brick of the wall in its place. And then Pink suffers a complete mental breakdown. Flying into a rage, he trashes his hotel room and he decides he doesn't need his wife or anyone else for that matter, and he retires behind his wall.
Goodbye, cruel world.
Now, as we get to side 3 on the album, I want to take a second to recognize our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. Here's a cool thing. Zenni adds new designs and patterns to their frames all the time. You can design your own frames, as I've said, can add amazing features. One of my favorites is blue blocks. protects your eyes from digital blue light that we come into contact with every day. It's been a game changer for me. All of this you can do for a price that just can't be beat. Click on the link right up here and you can get 80% off regular retail prices. Do it today.
Change my mind. Goodbye.
Side 3 of the album opens with the beautifully haunting Hey You, one of the most essential tracks on the album in my opinion. Locked in his hotel room, Pink pleads to past loves and friends, anybody who might care, not to forsake him.
Without a fight.
But you know, Pink begins to realize just how dire his situation is. No one is responding to his cries. So in tortured agony, he calls out, "Is there anybody out there?"
Is there anybody out there?
Pink continues to spiral down into his own oblivion, his apathy reaching new lows in the number Comfortably Numb. A track that, of course, many consider Pink Floyd's crowning achievement. It's a belief that I share as well.
Is there anybody in there?
At this point in the narrative, though, Pink is slated to appear on stage for a performance. However, he is fully detached from reality and in no condition to do so. So a feel-good doctor is called in to administer a shot, of something to get Pink up and going. After all, the show has to go on.
Get you on your feet again.
Okay, so just a disclaimer right here. What follows from here on out is wide open to interpretation. You can share your feelings below in the comments. But something inside of Pink snaps after receiving his injection. He dons a new sinister persona. The question is this an all too real reality? A twisted fantasy playing out in mind or a drug-induced hallucination? Maybe a mixture of all three, I don't know. I'll leave it to you to decide. Let's talk about it below. But let's get into it. Starting with In the Flesh, minus the question mark, the album enters into the so-called totalitarian trilogy.
Might like to go to the show.
The other two songs being Run Like Hell and Waiting for the Worms. In the Flesh finds Pink on stage to begin a very dark and diabolical performance in front of a crowd of adoring fans. Now the lines, Pink isn't well, he stayed back at the hotel, tells us immediately that he isn't the man we knew. We are now being addressed by a dark and perverse version of the protagonist. Imprisoned by his bricks, if you will, the former Pink watches helplessly as his shattered psyche dons the trappings of a fascist madman, which in a bitter twist of irony mirrors those same despots who brought about the death of his father. It's a sad example of the old phrase, if you can't beat him, join him. The cycle of oppression and pain just keeps rolling. And now Pink is cranking the wheel. And this is precisely where Run Like Hell comes in. So Run Like Hell, it's the third track on side 4 of The Wall. It's also the third track composed by David Gilmour for the album. Young Lust and Comfortably Numb being the other two. Like Comfortably Numb, Gilmour, he'd originally demoed Run Like Hell for his eponymous solo album in 1978. Man, can you imagine those songs hadn't made it onto The Wall? I don't even want to think about it. It is The Wall. Run Like Hell commences with Gilmour's distinct, repetitive staccato muted guitar. It's amazing. From there, he attacks the strings of his 1955 Fender Esquire with a palm mute rhythm section. The effect is phenomenal. Percussionist Nick Mason supports him with bass drum on each beat of the bar. David would confirm that the percussion on the track, it had disco leanings. This has been debated a lot. Apparently, Bob Ezrin had suggested adding a disco beat to some of the tracks on the album, including Another Brick of the Wall Part 2, which went to number 1. So he told Gilmour to frequent a nightclub to get a feel for what he had in mind. The guitarists reluctantly agreed. Waters and Mason were less resistant. I thought the disco drums were great, is what Mason would say. But then I have a slightly more simplistic approach anyway. Now, lyrically, fascist Pink, he continues to address his compliant crowd. However, for anyone who doesn't fall into line, Pink's words are cruel and frightening. Hammers will batter down your door, so you'd better run all day and run all night. Speaking with English broadcaster Tommy Vance, Roger Waters said, "Here's a tune for all paranoids in the audience." Roger Waters has long been fascinated by the Second World War, as most of you know, and the psychological grip that its dictators had on the masses. Interestingly enough, this led him to draw parallels between the Nazi rallies of the 1930s and modern rock concerts. In both cases, charismatic leaders had to power whip their crowds into a frenzy. Now, Run Like Hell shows us this dynamic reaching a fevered pitch. Oh man, the crowd chant of Pink Floyd takes on an ominous tone, obscuring the line between a ruckus audience and a riot-ready mob. Rather than shun Pink for his racist rants, the crowd prods him along. The song thus brings to life Roger Waters' fears, intolerance and racism becoming nationalistic virtues, resulting in the suppression of individual liberty. After decades of internalizing so much loss and pain, the worst in Pink has all come to the surface. Without mercy, he lashes out, threatening to harm anybody who dares defy his authority, including the remains of his former self. Run Like Hell takes on a whole added dimension in the 1982 film Pink Floyd the Wall. I mean, during the song sequence, the audience chants hammer and raises crossed arms in unison. Shrouded in black attire and faceless masks, the Pink's devotees cease to exist as individuals. Outside, Pink's skinhead henchmen rush into the streets, inciting havoc all over. They're destroying minority businesses and homes, loosing attack dogs, and assaulting an interracial couple in the back of a car. Mixed within these scenes, 3 men hang lifeless from a scaffold. It's very sobering. These horrific scenarios are reminiscent of Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass. During the night of November 9th through 10th, 1938, Nazi youth terrorized Jewish neighborhoods, smashing windows and covering the streets in glass. Nearly 100 Jews died that very night. More were badly beaten. Afterwards, close to 30,000 Jews were sent in concentration camps. As you can see, Roger Waters wasn't holding anything back with his portrayal. So outside of Pink Floyd The Wall, Run Like Hell, doesn't have much pop culture clout. It was released as a single, but it didn't perform very well, especially after they hit number 1 with Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. Chart position was one of Floyd's lowest, number 53. Not like they released many singles anyway. Elsewhere, it reached number 46 in Germany. The song did better in Canada and Sweden. It landed at number 18 and number 15. It went to 15 on Canada's RPM chart as well. Media appearances are virtually non-existent, though. This song is so specific to The Wall that's really disqualified itself for use on any other soundtrack. Or maybe the right film or moment just hasn't come along. But in terms of covers, aside from the unending stream of Pink Floyd tribute bands, there's really not a lot out there. I was able to dig a few. It looks like, Dream Theater, Primus, and Metallica have taken it on. So coming back to the aftermath of Run Like Hell, as Pink's drug-addled mind begins to come back to its senses, his fascist persona fades into the background. Waking up from his extended nightmare, Pink says, "I want to go home, take off this uniform, and leave the show."
Take off this uniform and leave the show.
But the hurting, it's not over yet. On the penultimate track, The Trial, Pink attempts to bring himself to justice. As judge, jury, and prosecution, Pink re-examines his criminal life, calling the narrative's primary characters as witnesses. His former school teacher, his estranged wife, they both deliver a savage assault on Pink's cracked psyche. Meanwhile, his domineering mother cries, "Worm, Your Honor, let me take him home."
Take him home.
The verdict, it's delivered, and Pink finds himself guilty. His sentence? Tear down the wall and expose himself once again to the world. The scream that coincides with the final breakdown of the wall signifies that this is a profoundly painful moment for this protagonist. Now, the final track, Outside the Wall, it feels like Waters is speaking directly to us as listeners, coaxing us all to bang our hearts against some mad bugger's wall in the hopes that perhaps we can help rescue some lost soul.
Banging your heart against some mad bugger's wall.
Then you can hear the words, "Isn't this," which in turn connects to the album's opening words, "Where we came in." Amazing.
Isn't this where we came in?
The divided sentence, it brings the album full circle, creating a cyclical experience. It implies that another wall that's already being built. It's the ultimate double album, a grand concept album or record, one that I listened to nonstop through my teenage years, getting deeper into its meaning as I matured. But it's really a warning. If we're not careful, we can isolate ourselves from our surroundings and build a wall that keeps us from our loved ones, our community, our purpose, and most of all, our principles, and become comfortably numb. It's a masterpiece. Of course it is. It's Pink Floyd. Thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Pink Floyd The Wall and Run Like Hell. What are your memories of this album, this record, this song? What is your interpretation of what I've just talked about? Let's have a great discussion below. Truly one of the greatest albums ever. I think it might be the definitive concept album ever. What do you think below? Let's have a great discussion. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. We'd love to have you. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.